Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to give you one of the latest William Samoei Ruto speech that shook the globe. Hotuba bao hata ilimfanya Joe Biden kujiuliza maswali mengi kuhusu William Samoei Ruto and Africa in general. And I think this is one of the speeches that made Joe Biden to initiate the process of inviting William Samoei Ruto to speak to the Joint House of Congress. Listen to this.
50 times the world's cumulative demand by 2030. The continent's untapped solar, wind, and geothermal potential is rated as super abundant in most African countries, meaning the potential is over 1,000 times the current demand. Yet, nearly 600 million Africans lack access to electricity, while another 150 million have highly unreliable access, and a whopping 900 million Africans have no access to clean cooking energy. Just imagine the paradox that we are in the middle of plenty while living in scarcity. The primary cause of Africa's minimal investment in exploiting its abundant green energy potential is the lack of energy-intense anchor demand. Such demand would make investment in additional energy generation capacity bankable and render universal energy access possible. Scientists tell us that achieving the net zero emissions by 2050 is imperative to sustain human civilization. Failure to reach this target will lead to devastating and irreversible impacts on ecosystems, weather patterns, and sea levels. At present rates, it will be extremely difficult, if not altogether impossible, for the world's industrial nations and fast-growing emerging economies to achieve net zero goals on time. The only way for the world to achieve this net zero aspiration by 2050 is for countries which presently have net negative emissions, as we do in most of Africa, to make up for those on course to missing the 2050 goal. The implication of this scenario is that African countries are uniquely positioned to limit own emissions and at the same time contribute reductions everywhere. We are not only in a position that we can limit our own emissions, but we can assist others. We can contribute to the reduction by others. The opportunity, therefore, exists to provide energy access for all Africans by 2030, while reducing total emissions from energy generation by creating green industrial capacity in Africa, thus positioning the continent to support the global net zero ambition. If Africa is indeed the young green continent of the future and the locus of the next industrial revolution, Africa's solutions are no longer restricted to Africa's problems. They also address humanity's problems effectively, global problems effectively. So we can confidently say that African solutions can actually provide global solutions. Aspirations often come with a problem of implementation. The concept paper contains a statement that I approved unreservedly. A sound policy framework should begin with formulation and end with implementation. But worldwide policy development is frequently prioritized without regard for performance. Our development partners tend to focus more on providing resources for policy development rather than implementing the policies. This situation has resulted in heaps of policy documents gathering clouds of dust on the shelves of government offices. As legislators, you are mandated not only to formulate law and policy, but also to rigorously oversee their implementation. To ensure that the African Union performs at the level of its aspirations, it will be necessary for you, as legislators, representatives, and overseers, to make sure that it empowers itself with sufficient capacity. Otherwise, African solutions, Agenda 2063, the African Continental Free Trade Area, and the young, clean, green continent of the future will remain a mere pipe dream. I want to persuade you. The power you enjoy today is delegated to you. The authority you enjoy today is delegated to you by the people of our continent. And let me remind you that the authority that you wield comes with responsibility. And responsibility comes with accountability. Our Africa Union, we have to rethink the architecture, the governance structure of our Africa Union. This parliament must provide the accountability mechanisms to make sure that all the structures of the African Union ultimately are answerable to the people of this continent. It is completely against the principles of accountability to have an impotent parliament. A parliament that cannot approve the budget of our organization. A parliament that cannot hold to account the executives in our administration is not the kind of parliament the people of Africa envisaged. It's not the kind of parliament our forefathers envisaged when constituting our union. The clearest path available to humanity, not just to us, available to humanity, is to relocate global industrial production capacity to Africa and therefore meet Africa's as well as the world's growing demand for goods and services in a green-first manner that also enables the continent to leapfrog the industrial development path taken by the global north. An African green industrial capacity will not only serve global demand, but it will also decarbonize global production, thereby fulfilling humanity's most ambitious climate goals. This is the very honest conversation we want to have. We are saying we can have a win-win in this engagement. We do not have to engage in the usual finger pointing. You caused this, you did not cause that. That's all fine. We contributed the least, that's fine. We are suffering the most, that's okay. But we can together agree on a solution that carries everybody. And that is the proposition we are having as the leadership of this continent. We are not selfish. We are willing to share, to present our resources so that we can not only solve our problem, but we can solve the global problem of climate change. The Pan-African Parliament is a critical organ of the African Union, whose full institutional potential is going to become manifest as we rally to formulate effective and sustainable solutions to the tremendous cries confronting our people and humanity in general. This parliament rises higher and goes further than the sum of its legislative, representative, and oversight mandate for Africa. This assembly is the august crucible where the full range of African voices, the diversity of African ideas, and the variety of African insights interact and generate the principles and knowledge that we need to inform our endeavors to give present and future generations a prosperous and a secure Africa, together with a livable planet. I therefore congratulate all of you for the confidence you have clearly inspired to be chosen as the African people's representatives in this parliament. The world is presently confronted with a daunting array of multifaceted challenges, which range from the pandemic recovery to the existential threat of climate change. There is also the prevailing adverse financial environment characterized by increasing interest rates and looming debt distress affecting Africa and the many other regions, not forgetting the complex security implications of a delicate geopolitical crisis. At this time, your leadership as members of this House is more vital than ever to guide and support all other institutions of the African Union in pursuit of a new, ambitious, and inspiring vision. It is a time to be bold, to be strong and resolute enough to confront these challenges with greater unity and greater commitment. It is time to extend our forefathers' Pan-African dream into a brave new world in order to bequeath the people of Africa and our future generations a much better, more secure, and prosperous Africa that plays its role and makes its contribution in full to global affairs. And we must be bold because we are the continent of the future. We are the continent of young people, hungry for better life and a clear role in the world affairs. Unfortunately, however, the discursive profile of the continent has too often been focused on the challenges and the difficulties we face and the assistance we need in a way that depicts us as chronically subordinate, eternally vulnerable, and perpetually incapable. As a consequence, an emerging psychology of victimhood implicates both African and global leadership in a politics of pity and helplessness. It also denies the world's youngest continent, repository of unparalleled abundance, the agency to articulate appropriate solutions for its own problems and to offer its unique, indispensable contribution on the broader global stage. I am persuaded that our generation of African leaders has the historic mandate to retire this unhelpful profile and in its place articulate a more accurate and compelling portrait of Africa that is both faithful to fact yet also developmentally inspirational. Through this fundamental shift, we have the opportunity to empower and mobilize our people to drive transformation attract investment, and inspire partnerships and collaborations across the world. I see a tremendously decisive role for yourselves as members of the Pan-African Parliament, since you represent the voices of Africans on all issues pertaining to every sphere and sector of individual and collective endeavor. Please don't let us down. Instead of all the games being played, all we need to do, we are telling the world, we have our assets, we are willing to have a win-win engagement. We have the largest green energy potential, resources. The world has no choice. We cannot continue the fossil fuel fired industrialization. It has to change. All we are saying is we are coming with our assets, come with investment and technology. We meet halfway and everybody wins. That's all we are saying. We are tired of complaining. We are tired of being victims. We want to be part of the solution. Don't consign Africa to the margins of problems and being victims and managing adaptation. We have better proposals that can get all of us out of the quagmire that we are all in. A critical growth opportunity that can be the starting point for our intentional efforts in pursuit of our aspiration is fiscal space arising from both debt restructuring and blended capital, combined with economic growth that increases tax revenues and positions African countries to invest more in adaptation and resilience. Once we have a win-win, once we are making money, once we are engaged in economic activity, we can take care of the adaptation. We can take care of resilience. Don't bring resilience into the equation to fool anybody that we are going to get anywhere with money for adaptation. You know, we are managing a problem. We want to be part of the solution. Don't consign us to managing a problem. I submit to you, in this esteemed assembly, my good friends, that by taking these measures with a degree of both urgency and resolve, Africa's leaders can energize our economies and inspire the people with a new vision centered on investment and growth, which is in harmony with our planet. In doing so, our generation will have discharged a tremendous historic developmental mandate while realizing our common global ambition to arrest and ultimately reverse climate change. We will also make it possible for our economies to meet the needs and fulfill the hopes of a young workforce, which grows at an annual rate of about 30 million young people in our continent, requiring us to generate millions of decent jobs every year. Your work, honorable members, therefore, is clearly cut out, and your assignment very well defined. By facilitating robust and continuous discourse on the broadest cross-section of Africa, this Parliament will simultaneously employ the federative transmission of ideas from discrete grassroots agencies to the global and continental, multilateral and intergovernmental fora, and at the same time engage the devolutionary mechanisms of domesticating global standards and international norms. Although the theme of this session is the African continent at crossroads. Our discussion has enlarged our field of deliberation to encapsulate possibilities that transcend our defining dilemma of past decades. For a while, Africa has struggled with an implied trade-off between economic growth and prosperity on one hand, and environmental sustainability on the other. We can now agree that given the transitional imperative, it is possible for Africa to execute clean, green industrialization that can enable the rest of the world attain the net zero target as well. We finally have the answer to the dilemma, and with it, our way out of the thematic crossroads. Simply, Africa is the answer. We don't have to be at the crossroads. The whole reform agenda around the AU is a necessary imperative. It is not possible for us as states, as governments, to hold all the power and expect the African Union to function. We must be bold enough to delegate some of the powers of our nations to the collective body of the African Union. That is what other progressive unions have done. It is not possible for us to continue to engage with the rest of the world the way we are doing. The budget of African Union, to a good extent, is funded by development partners. What does it say about our ability to make our own decisions? It is said, he who pays the piper calls the tune. As things stand today, and I say this with tremendous respect, the Africa Commission Chair, the Africa Union Commission Chair, does not have what it takes to prosecute the agenda for our continent. We still hold all the power as heads of state and expect the union to function. It cannot function. We have to donate some of the power to the collective authority of the union. I had occasion, let me explain to you something. I had occasion a few weeks ago to talk with the German Chancellor, and he was explaining to me how Germany has donated matters trade, matters investment to the European Union, and they have immensely benefited by working together as 27 governments, 475 million people. In our continent, we still want to keep all the powers in our little corners. How are we going to negotiate with EU as a country? How are you going to negotiate? And this is the candid conversation we must have. The Pan-African Parliament must operate at the same level as the European Parliament. If we have to engage with the European Union on a platform as equals, who said that Africa cannot be part of the solution? That when Africa is being discussed, it's only being discussed in the context of the problems. And our voices are limited to, you are victims of climate change. We will help you to manage situation. We will manage you to deal with adaptation. We will look for some little money for mitigation. We do not want to be in that corner. We want to be in the conversation about the solutions. And we have what it takes. And shortly, I will be proposing to you why I consider that, in fact, the reason why we have been in a circus for all these years, it's because we as Africans have not stepped forward with our capabilities to provide the solution to this challenge of climate change. As the chair of the Committee of African Heads of State and Governments on Climate Change, I fully associate myself with the consensus that has evolved among Africa's leaders who have refused to be tethered to this unsatisfactory ideology. Instead, we have been pushing a fresh, affirmative, and solution-oriented perspective. And I have come here today to ask you to join us in executing this change of course, articulating a fundamentally Pan-African principle and amplifying new ethos that summons the world to live, produce, and consume in harmony with nature that will be spearheaded by Africa. We want to occupy every space. We are going to be consistent. We are going to be coherent. We are going to be audible until there is no place to hide. Until the conferences are stopped. Otherwise, we will make them noisy, we will make them messy, and there will be consequences. If we are not heard, we are refusing to stay on the margins anymore. Yeah? We want to be at the table. Because we are told the risk of not being at the table is that you could be in the menu. So, we are going to occupy every space. And we have been gentlemen for far too long. We are now going to appropriate our place because we have a contribution to make. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening to me. I don't take it for granted. And God bless you.
Ladies and gentlemen, as the President of the Republic of Kenya was given a standing ovation in the Pan-African Parliament, it is this speech that has attracted America. It is this speech that has attracted Europe. It is this speech that has shocked America. It is this speech that have made Joe Biden to invite William Samoei Ruto to address Congress. William Samoei Ruto raised a number of issues that shook America. A number of issues that shook Biden administration, European Union, and Africa in general. Number one, he told the world that Africa has the greatest green energy, something that nobody would talk about, something that many people would not dare to talk about. But the fact is, the greatest green energy is found in Africa. And in this case, William Samoei Ruto was right. He may have been wrong on so many occasions. He may have been wrong on so many other issues. But about the greatest great energy, I give him exceeding expectation. I give him a right. I give him a tick. I give him a thumbs up. The second thing that shook America, Joe Biden and European Union, is about Africa assets. Africa has the greatest assets. Africa seems to have the greatest asset in the world. And it is these assets that are attracting Joe Biden. It is these assets that are attracting the European Union. It is this speech on Pan-African Parliament that has made Joe Biden to invite William Samoei Ruto to address Congress. The other thing about this speech is that William Samoei Ruto is telling America, he's telling the world, that we should have a win-win situation, because for a greater part, mara nyingi tumeona Afrika ikipoteza. Mara nyingi tumeona kwamba Waafrika wamekuwa wakibubazwa na wazungu. But now, in this speech, where William Samoei Ruto is given a standing ovation by the Pan-African Parliament, and you see, when you talk about the Pan-African Parliament, we are talking about the whole of Africa. He is telling the world that Africa should have a win-win situation. We are not going to allow the European Union, America, and West Africa and other countries to win against our continent. Something else that he talked about in this speech is about debt restructuring. Debt restructuring is talking about a situation whereby Africa must renegotiate the debts. You realize with me, you realize this channel that I've been talking about the debt crisis, whereby Waafrika wamelimbikizwa madeni ambayo yamewashinda. Ladies and gentlemen, when I look at Africa, Africa has opened the door to the European Union. Africa has opened the door to America. But this speech was an eye-opener. This speech shook the Americans. I want to give you another speech that shook the Americans and has attracted William Samoei Ruto and Americans in general. It has made these guys to be very, very careful about William Samoei Ruto. You know, the first speech he was talking about, listen.
Dear colleagues, in an increasingly...
Ladies and gentlemen, here, William Samoei Ruto is addressing European Parliament. And I want you to take all the way to America, where Joe Biden is now mad because he strongly feels that William Samoei Ruto must address the joint house, joint Congress, American legislative arm of the government. See, here is in the European Union. Look at this. Sikiliza.
A complex geopolitical context, the European and African continents share mutual challenges and concerns. As a like-minded partner and a key strategic ally on the African continent, it is my pleasure to welcome President William Ruto of the Republic of Kenya to the European Parliament. President Ruto, this House has closely followed your commitment towards our shared values and democratic principles. Your active engagement in strengthening multilateral institutions, your pivotal role in upholding the rules-based international order in times of war, contributing to international burden sharing, whether by hosting refugees or by backing peace-building and police missions across the world. We have also seen Kenya's influential role in amplifying Africa's concerns on climate change. The summit, organized recently in Nairobi, the first Africa Climate Summit, underlined our shared vision on international climate diplomacy and decarbonization. The European Union is committed to the transition towards renewable energy sources, and I am convinced that we will share the needed leadership when implementing the Global Gateway project on green hydrogen. Kenyans can be proud of their democracy, of their vibrant civil society, of their pluralistic and free media. And because you are here amongst allies and...
Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to listen very carefully about Project Ruto. Here, William Samoei Ruto is addressing the European Union immediately after addressing the Pan-African Parliament. So it cannot be a coincidence that William Samoei Ruto is addressing the whole world. It cannot be a coincidence because, as I've said from the earliest beginning, William Samoei Ruto is a project of America. William Samoei Ruto is a project of the West. William Samoei Ruto is a stooge. William Samoei Ruto is just here to achieve some objectives. Listen to what they are saying in European Union.
Friends, allow me a moment to emphasize the crucial link between democracy and human rights in building inclusive societies. This means embracing diversity, including on sexual orientation, protecting minorities, and addressing inequalities. One last word on trade. Let me commend you on the conclusion of the negotiations to establish an EU-Kenya Economic Partnership Agreement, which is due to be signed next month. This House stands ready to play a positive and constructive continued role in strengthening our cooperation. Dear President Ruto, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam President, members of the European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. I am truly honored to stand before you today in this esteemed chamber. Your invitation to address this assembly symbolizing the unity and diversity of Europe is a privilege I hold in high regard. I extend my heartfelt thanks to all of you, the distinguished representatives of 450 million citizens across 27 member states. Madam President, I am particularly grateful for your gracious welcome, which reflects the spirit of solidarity and cooperation that this assembly embodies. This eminent institution plays a critical role in shaping policies and decisions that affect not only Europe, but also its partners around the world, including Kenya. Let me express my sincere gratitude for your support in the imminent conclusion of the Economic Partnership Agreement between the European Union and Kenya. This is a major leap forward in our trade and economic relationship. The EU remains one of our most important trading allies, accounting for more than a fifth of Kenya's global exports. I must emphasize the impact of this agreement extends far beyond trade statistics. It opens a world of opportunities, facilitating not only the exchange of goods, but also ideas and innovations. It is a bridge between people and cultures, and continents. These are difficult times, no doubt. We find ourselves amidst a formidable storm of challenges, each not only complex in its own way, but also deeply interconnected. New and renewed international conflict and wars, as witnessed most recently in Ukraine, Israel, and Gaza, the Sahel, the Sudan, Somalia, the DRC, creating widespread human suffering and deepening divisions in a period where global collaboration and unity are of paramount importance. Democracy is under pressure in many parts of the world, and multilateral institutions, once the hope for international solidarity, are struggling to maintain broad-based acceptance, relevance, and effectiveness. At the same time, progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals is unraveling. Rising interest rates and looming debt distress make it much harder for countries to address their own socioeconomic challenges. High cost of living, fiscal strain, and migration are weakening international solidarity. And most existentially, the world, as the UN Secretary General reminded us recently, is literally on fire. The era of global boiling. It used to be global warming, emphasizing the severe and escalating impact of climate change. The escalating severity of climate change is particularly acute and poignant in Africa, a continent that, despite its minimal contribution to global emissions, finds itself at the forefront of environmental vulnerability. In Africa, with less buffers to address climate change challenges, we feel the impact more directly and more acutely. Consider, for example,
ladies and gentlemen, if you listen to what William Samoei Ruto is saying, most of the things that he's addressing is about climate change. If you listen to William Samoei Ruto, mambo mengi ambayo anazungumzia ni mambo ambayo yanahusiana na tabia nchi. If you listen to William Samoei Ruto, a number of things that he wants Kenyans to realize, a number of things that he's doing, he looks like he's trying to capture the attention of the world. But it looks like something that is planned. When you look at it very keenly, you see William Samoei Ruto is a president who was planted in Kenya by the Americans, a president who was planted by the European, the white man, to achieve certain objectives. Listen, ladies and gentlemen.
The significant influence of high inflation rates on voting behaviors in your region, and I'm told you're going to elections shortly. Now imagine the impact of a year-on-year food price inflation exceeding 10% in sub-Saharan African countries where food makes up a third of household expenses. These challenges are not isolated. They are interconnected layers of a complex historical, economic, and environmental narrative that the continent endures. Africa still carries the scars of colonialism which remain visible in the economic and institutional dependencies that continue to hinder progress and perpetuate social and political fragility. As acknowledging these issues is important, but focusing solely on them risks obscuring the broader horizon and opportunity. The adversarial North versus South dynamic has not served us well, denying us the opportunity to leverage each other's strengths. Similarly, the East versus West divide is untenable and counterproductive, working against the interests of all of us. climate change has introduced a new dimension into this complex equation. While it poses an existential...
Ladies and gentlemen, how many times has President William Samoei Ruto mentioned the word climate change? If you have been counting, it is more than 16 times. And he's not even half of the speech. And he's addressing the European Parliament. And this one is happening after he addressed the Pan-African Parliament. So, ladies and gentlemen, why do you think Joe Biden want William Samoei Ruto to address a joint session of the Congress? And this is one of the greatest honors that an American can give, the American president can give to any leader, not only in Africa, but also in the whole world. Continue watching.
Potential threat, climate change has also emerged as a leveling force, equalizing us all in the face of a shared global challenge, transcending all divides, north-south, east-west, developed or developing. Collectively, therefore, we have the means to make progress. Advanced technology, robust financial systems, and dynamic markets, alongside pioneering advantages in various sectors, are key assets of the global north. Historically, the global south has played a vital role in supporting North's industrialization by providing raw materials and markets. Now, as we navigate a new era of global interdependence, this needs to evolve into a reciprocal relationship, a shift towards a more balanced and equitable global partnership with a deliberate transfer of technologies and intentional flow of capital to the global south. And to this also means a seat at the table to look for solutions that work for all of us in a spirit of cooperation and mutual understanding. Thus, it is essential to reassess long-standing assumptions that sometimes are not true, rethink perceived barriers, and question default decisions. We need to be bold and strategic, and also take the decisive step towards structural shift required to fulfill the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and keep global warming at 1.5 degrees centigrade. This was precisely the premise of the inaugural Africa Climate Summit that I hosted in Nairobi in September. The summit provided a platform not just to discuss the challenges we face, but to view them through the lens of solutions and opportunities. Therefore, I'm hopeful because there exists a real opportunity, an opportunity to reach sustainable, equitable prosperity for all of humanity, an opportunity for the European Union to accelerate its race to net zero, decarbonize its industry, and build the economy of the future. And an opportunity for Africa to provide security and stability for all Africans while taking its rightful place in the 21st century economy. The Africa Climate Summit culminated in the Nairobi Declaration, which sets out the vision and a pathway for Africa to be a vital part of the global solution to the existential climate change challenge that we all face. The declaration captures the consensus of the African government leaders for climate-positive growth. We have the world's biggest untapped renewable energy potential, the youngest and fastest growing workforce and human capital, and relevant natural resources and assets. 60%, for example, of the world's best solar potential is in Africa, as well as 60% of the remaining unused arable land in the world. These assets create an inherent ability for Africa to produce green from the start, cost-competitive products and services, and to provide some of the highest quality carbon removal services anywhere in the world. When it comes to green economy, our reality is marked differently from that of Europe. Over 600 million Africans are deprived of access to energy, a fundamental prerequisite for dignified living and the provision of basic yet vital services like health and education. Adding to this is the fact that almost 1 billion Africans lack access to clean cooking. While the global narrative often emphasizes energy transition, for most of Africa, it is about energy growth, energy expansion, and energy access. It follows that how Africa takes on this challenge will matter a great deal both regionally and globally. It will matter whether Africa can transform into a green powerhouse that helps the world decarbonize. Equally important is the focus on providing education and opportunities for youth of Africa. By investing in education and skills development, in our young population, Africa can create a vibrant, self-sustaining economy that offers its youth compelling reasons to build their future at home in Africa. This approach, underpinned by structured migration, can alleviate the pressure on regions like Europe, which increasingly rely on economic migrants to maintain their standards of living. Adopting this agenda is not just a choice, but a necessity. The alternative, which neglects Africa's development and industrialization and fails to invest in the young generation, is not, members, a viable option. Allow me to illustrate with a few tangible examples of how our strategies and interests converge. In Kenya, for example, we already have a 92% green grid. Our challenge is not how to get that to 100%, because we will. Rather, our challenge is how to grow it from its current size of just 3 gigawatts, which is, I'm told, less than 25% of the Paris metropolitan area for a country with 5 times as many people. We want to grow our grid to 100 gigawatts by 2050 so that it can power green industrialization and create prosperity through green growth. In June this year, this very parliament adopted legislation to create the enabling environment for the domestic production of 10 million tons of green hydrogen by 2030 and the import of a similar amount in order to green EU's industry. African countries are recognized as potential producers of this green hydrogen, and we welcome the collaboration. Kenya, for example, is developing a plant to produce green fertilizer, which will reduce our import dependency, and we have an opportunity to export green hydrogen from our geothermal resources to Europe. Another EU-relevant example is bauxite. Africa currently mines 25% of the world's bauxite, yet exports almost all of it in raw material. If Africa's renewable energy potential were deployed to smelt currently mined bauxite into aluminium, we could save millions of tons of CO2 equivalent and generate hundreds of thousands of jobs in our continent. And aluminium is just one example of many. Green steel is another. Not to mention Africa's significant global deposits of critical minerals, or our potential to produce sustainable fuels. By tapping into these resources and employing green technologies, Africa can contribute significantly to global decarbonization efforts while boosting its own economic development, creating a win-win scenario for both the continent and the world, while Africa, as a source of raw materials and market for finished products, contributed to Europe's industrialization there has been tremendous growth in technology and capital. It is, ladies and gentlemen, I request, it is the time for Europe to deploy their technologies and capital to now unlock the huge green energy resources to drive green industrialization using the natural resource endowments in the continent, global green products and services, create jobs, and at the same time, decarbonize Europe and global growth. Indeed, I could devote much more time to unfolding the vast richness of our continent. Yet, the path to realizing Africa's full potential is paved with significant challenges. Let's consider some sobering facts. In the last 2 decades, global investments in renewable energy soared to an impressive $3 trillion. But only a fraction of this, $60 billion, or just 2%, found its way to Africa, despite our enormous potential and urgent energy needs. A critical obstacle in this journey is the prohibitive high cost of capital. Private investors are demanding high premiums, in great part on perceived risks. Consequently, we are burdened with borrowing costs at least 5 times higher than those of advanced economies, creating a vicious cycle of debt. This disparity not only hinders our progress, but also makes any meaningful development financing unattainable. This situation is indefensible, both morally and economically, and changing it is possible. Changing it is possible, but it requires our collective will and resourcefulness. Above all, it requires new forms of cooperation that are based on mutually beneficial strategies. Europe has been an ally and a partner to Africa for many years, encompassing a broad spectrum of initiatives that are very important for our continent, from economic cooperation that fosters trade and investment, to the vital steps taken in energy and climate change through initiatives like the Africa-EU Energy Partnership, and we are making very steady progress in that direction. Our collective efforts in peace and security, notably supported by the African Peace Facility, have been influential in promoting stability across the continent. In education and research, programs like Erasmus Plus have opened new horizons for our youth, while joint efforts in health have underscored the importance of robust health systems. We are working together on migration management, focusing on issues such as combating human trafficking and addressing the root cause of irregular migration. And initiatives such as the Global Gateway have the possibility to open new avenues for cooperation. But we can, and we must do more. Above all, we must remain alert to the risk of conflict, as tensions and disagreements can escalate rapidly with far-reaching and costly consequences. The conflict in the heart of Europe, something unimaginable in the 21st century, underscores this reality. In the face of such challenges, the role of Kenya as a stable democracy and an anchor state for peace and security in the region becomes increasingly significant. As the Africa Union mission in Somalia is concluding, Kenya as a frontline state will continue our support and collaboration with the government in Somalia to fight against terrorism. This ongoing commitment is crucial for maintaining regional stability, and we count on the EU bilateral support for our efforts in this regard. In another part of the world, the situation in Haiti highlights the global nature of security challenges. Grounded in United Nations resolutions, multinational security support mission will need some 5,000 men and women to address the challenge posed by armed gangs. estimated to be around 9,000. Currently, about 8 countries, including Kenya, are willing to contribute their forces to Haiti, but there is a clear need for assurance of international support. The support from the EU will be instrumental in bolstering the initiative, providing the necessary resources, including legitimacy. Madam President, members of this great august House, fostering long-term peace and stability goes hand in hand with building sustainable economic foundations. And Africa is mapping out the road for green industrialization and prosperity, so that it can play its rightful role in shaping a better future for all. In this endeavor, the partnership with Europe and Africa must embody a reciprocal relationship grounded in shared objectives and cooperative effort. This synergy has the power to drive transformative results for both continents. Concrete actionable steps are the key to realizing this mutually beneficial vision. Firstly, Africa's journey to become a green industrial powerhouse needs the right type and amount of capital, especially in renewable energy and infrastructure. Such investment could catapult Africa to a future where energy access is universal by 2030, simultaneously slashing emissions from energy generation in Africa by 80%. Secondly, there is a necessary complement to capital market access. In fact, one of the biggest contributions that EU can make to both addressing poverty in Africa and achieving global climate goals is through its demand for green products and services, including for carbon credits. Africa wants to compete. Crucially, we are not asking for further exemptions or a lower bar, but with high requirement on quality and integrity. Thirdly, the EU has a golden opportunity to leverage high-quality African carbon credits that conserve and expand natural carbon sinks, reduce emissions, and remove atmospheric carbon. These days, not a week goes without an expose about bad carbon credits. And while issues exist in the market, it is important to not lose sight of one of the core drivers. The current price of 50 cents to a few dollars per ton in the voluntary market is simply impossible to generate quality credits. In the Nairobi Declaration, we committed to leaning forward in increasing the bar on quality and integrity on carbon and other relevant effects of this project. It will be that much easier to do so with the prospect of market access. In Kenya, the draft carbon markets regulation is in the final stage of finalization. And we believe that using this carbon credit instrument, we can create resources to not only expand our growth, but also decarbonize global growth. Fourthly, aligning European concessional and multilateral capital with Africa's climate agenda is also an economic idea. It is about phasing down climate incompatible funding to shift them towards climate action, unlock much more concessional finance, and lower risks. Here I invite the European Investment Bank to play a bigger role in Kenya and on the continent with its expertise and resources. And finally, African economies are constrained by lack of appropriate and sufficient finance and investment. As African countries, we pay 5 times as much for our debt as would pay if the multilateral development banks were appropriately capitalized. those seeking investment for private projects face high costs of capital and unhelpful short tenures driven by both real and perceived risk factors. We face a chokehold on a vicious cycle as countries. Our ability to invest consistently and strategically in basic infrastructure, social services, and skills development is severely hampered. And lack of that investment contributes to the high-risk premiums and makes it harder for private projects to become viable and attractive. This is a very strong list of proposals to reform the international financial architecture. We support this and more, and we are in good company. For example, the implementation of the Capital Adequacy Framework Review of the MDBs has broad-based support across G7 and G20. Yet our path to action is a bit too slow. I call on all of us to accelerate and expand these measures, such as with the tax working group we are launching with France at the COP28 next month. Lastly, Europe's experience in workforce development and reskilling offers invaluable insights. By learning from Europe's successful models in education and vocational training, we can build capacity and equip our youth with the competencies required in an evolving global economy. Members, Europe is a significant investor and trade partner in Africa, a relationship that has been fruitful over the years. Our collaborative efforts have helped generate millions of jobs and enhance livelihoods across the continent. This partnership is not only a cornerstone of our past and present, but it is also crucial for our future. I extend a warm invitation to European companies, institutions, and organizations to explore the many opportunities our continent has to offer. Join us in a collaborative endeavor to unearth and develop solutions that leverage our respective strengths, drive innovation, and benefit not only Africa, but also contribute to global progress. Because our story does not stop with our two continents, this is a global story. The demands of our time are great and full of uncertainty. Addressing this effectively hinges on a robust commitment to multilateralism and international cooperation. However, it is increasingly clear that the institutions and structures established in the 20th century are not fit for purpose anymore. We must ensure they are equipped to address contemporary challenges and pave the way for inclusion, equality, and prosperity. This calls for a fundamental redefinition of international cooperation. We must move beyond arrangements that perpetuate cycles of indebtedness and dependence. Our aim should be to bring about real, additional financing that does not merely escalate debt burdens or facilitate the extraction of profits. Cooperation that does not lock in developing countries in fossil fuel dependency, but allows them to advance alongside the rest of the world in the transition to sustainable energy. Genuine partnerships that prioritize people and their well-being on a livable planet. In today's interconnected world, where the fortunes of all nations are tightly woven together, a new era of cooperation and collective action is necessary for a prosperous and peaceful world. In the face of threats that transcend borders and oceans, it is essential to adopt a clear-sighted and unified approach to confront climate change, combat poverty, and tackle conflict. Madam President, Madam President, honorable members, the annals of history are replete with instances where collective action has achieved what no single nation could accomplish alone. We are acutely aware that our decisions and actions will significantly shape the 21st century. Years from now, future generations will reflect on this era, scrutinizing the choices we make in this moment. Let it be said that we were visionary, not just preoccupied with the present, but deeply invested in the future. Let our legacy be one of foresight, collaboration, and solidarity. Let us be guided by a deep commitment to ensuring a prosperous, equitable, and sustainable world for those who will follow our footsteps. I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is these two speeches that rattled Joe Biden. It is these two speeches that attracted Joe Biden to invite William Samoei Ruto to address a joint sitting of the Congress. And as you know, Africa is complaining about unfair trade. As you know, Africa is not comfortable with the imbalance of trade that is taking place between Africa and Europe and Africa and America. And when you see William Samoei Ruto giving that kind of speech in the Pan-African Parliament and the European Union, then you should understand why Joe Biden has been uncomfortable. And Joe Biden will not be comfortable until William Samoei Ruto addresses a joint sitting of the Congress. Ladies and gentlemen, when you look at Africa, Africa is endowed with a lot of resources. And by the way, it is still raining. Mvua kila mahali, and I understand Thika Road is impassable, Mombasa Road impassable, Nakuru, Nairobi Road impassable, and even the bypass is impassable. So guys, let's be very careful. Let us be very, very careful as we travel, as we drive along the roads. Let us be extremely careful. Let us be very cautious with whatever you're doing. It's a Sunday, and I want to end this video at this point. If you are joining this channel for the first time, this is Gachie Skyman TV, the tallest man in Black Africa. Again, we shall be live from 11 a.m. We shall take some 2 or 3 hours to be live. We want to interact with you. We want to give you record time. And by the way, even Mombasa is not badly off. The Hidaya, the cyclones have not caused much damage. Ni kitu ambacho labda, maybe we don't know what will happen after this, but from the latest news, for what we have been gathering, hatujaona mabaya mengi ambayo tunaweza tukasema kwamba tumeachwa, kuna maovu ambayo yametokea, kuna madhara ambayo yametokea. Ni yale tu ambayo tunaona, mafuriko ambayo wamejaa kila mahali, wananchi wakilalamika, kila mmoja akilalamika. And guys, please have a blessed Sunday. Those of you who are going to church, please remind the pastors to take the offering, the tithe, everything, the sacrifice, the tithe, the offering. What else? Take it to those people who are suffering. Take it to the people who are actually victims of the floods. Guys, have a blessed Sunday. We shall be live again at 11 a.m. Kindly, bye-bye.